قُلْ مَنْ كَانَ عَدُوًّا لِجِبْرِيلَ فَإِنَّهُ نَزَّلَهُ عَلَىٰ قَلْبِكَ. Now, as we have seen, although they recognized Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, they knew that Quran is true, they only disbelieved because Muhammad was not a Jew sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He was not from amongst them. And they were angry. Why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has snatched from us this institution of prophethood? It had been with us, this grace of Allah, this blessing of Allah. It was with us for at least 1400 years. Why has it been snatched from us? Now due to the same reason, they were angry with Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam. Because he brought the wahi to Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He is our enemy. Actually, now they became the enemies of Jibreel. Just as you know, there has been a small section of Ahl Tashayyu who are called Ghurabiya. They have the belief, Hazrat Mujaddid al-Fisani rahmatullah alayhi mentioned them in his Makatib, in his letters. They believe that actually prophethood was aimed for Hazrat Ali radiyallahu ta'ala, not for Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Jibreel by mistake took the wahi to Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. It was by mistake only. Because the spirits and souls of Ali and Muhammad were very similar. Therefore, he just was mistaken. He couldn't recognize. Actually, the wahi was meant for Ali radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, and mistakenly Jibreel took it to Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But till this, that is their belief. The same was the case with the Jews. They thought that it is actually the action of Jibreel, the decision of Jibreel, that he took that wahi that was meant for one of us to Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam from the progeny of Ismail. قُلْ مَنْ كَانَ عَدُوًّا لِجِبْرِيلَ فَإِنَّهُ نَزَّلَهُ عَلَىٰ قَلْبِكَ بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. Tell them, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, whosoever is an enemy to Jibreel, he must know that he has brought down this wahi to your heart, O Muhammad, with the permission and command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not in his own. مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ. And this has been sent down, confirming that which is present with them before it, that is Torah and Injil. وَهُدًى وَبُشْرَى لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And it is the guidance and it is the glad tidings for all the mu'mineen, for all who believe. مَنْ كَانَ عَدُوًّا لِلَّهِ وَمَلَائِكَتِهِ. Whosoever is an enemy to Allah and His angels, وَرُسُلِهِ, and His messengers and prophets, وَجِبْرِيلَ وَمِيكَالَ, and Jibreel and Mikael, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ عَدُوًّا لِلْكَافِرِينَ. He should know that Allah is enemy to all such disbelievers. They are actually challenging Allah. They are getting the enmity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in reward. وَلَقَدْ أَنزَلْنَا إِلَيْكَ آيَاتٍ بَيِّنَاتٍ. And we have sent down to you, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, these clear ayat. وَمَا يَكْفُرُ بِهَا إِلَى الْفَاسِقُونَ. And nobody except the transgressors or rebellious in nature will disbelieve these ayat. These are so clear and so very self-evident that only those who are rebellious in nature, they will only disbelieve them. أَوَكُلَّمَا أَحَدُوا أَحَدًا نَبَذَهُ فَرِيقٌ مِّنْهُمْ. Is it not that whenever they ratified a treaty, ratified a covenant, نَبَذَهُ فَرِيقٌ مِّنْهُمْ, a group from them, a part from them, they threw it away, threw it aside. بَلْ أَكْثَرُهُمْ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. But most of them don't believe actually. They are in a community of Bani Israel, they are a race. It's a racial religion. All people who belong to that race think that they are Jews, they are Mu'mins. While only a few of them are real Mu'mins. أَكْثَرُهُمْ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. Most of them, the great majority of them, don't have that faith. The same case is with us today. Out of the billion, more than a billion Muslims, how many have real faith, real conviction, real belief in Allah and the hereafter and the day of judgment and the institution of wahi? How many of us? So that was the case of the former ummah. Al-aksarahum la yu'minun. وَلَمَّا جَاءَهُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْ عِندِ اللَّهِ, and when a messenger from Allah came to them, مُصَدِّقٌ لِمَا مَعَهُمْ, again the same verse, confirming that which was already present with them, that is Torah and Injil. نَبَذَ فَرِيقٌ مِّنَ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ كِتَابَ اللَّهِ وَرَاءَ ظُهُورِهِمْ. A party, a group of those who were given the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before this Quran, they threw this book, this new book of Allah, Quran, on their backs. كَأَنَّهُمْ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ, as if they don't know, they don't recognize. Although they knew, they recognized. يَعْرِفُونَهُ كَمَا يَعْرِفُونَ أَبْنَاهُمْ. They recognized it just as they recognized their own sons. But they apparently took the attitude of throwing it away. No, nothing, it's nothing. So actually that was their apparent attitude. وَاتَّبَعُوا مَا تَتْلُو الشَّيَاطِينُ عَلَى مُلْكِ سُلَيْمَانَ. Now if you leave something that is correct, then necessarily something wrong comes in its place. When they gave up following the book of Allah, they started pursuing other occult sciences, sorcery, magic, all these things, that are very common among some Muslims also, the ignorant Muslim also. So taweez, gande, sorcery and magic and this and that. So these become, articles of interest with those people who don't have the real deen before them. What tabahu, when they threw back on their backs the books of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the real guidance, what did they pursue? What tabahu ma tatlu shayateenu ala mulki Sulaiman, and they followed what the shayateen they were pursuing or reciting in the days of the kingdom of Sulaiman alayhi salatu wassalam. وَمَا كَفَرَ سُلَيْمَانُ وَلَكِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ كَفَرُوا. All this magic you will find goes in the name of Sulaiman, Naqsh Sulaimani, the taweez, as if all these things, they originated from Hazrat Sulaiman alayhi salatu wassalam. Quran says, no, وَمَا كَفَرَ سُلَيْمَانُ. This sorcery and magic, it is kufr. How could Sulaiman alayhi salatu wassalam commit kufr? وَمَا كَفَرَ سُلَيْمَانُ وَلَكِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ كَفَرُوا. This was the shayateen during his days, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him the control over jinns. And among the jinns there were Muslims also and shayateen also. So although they were under the control of Sulaiman, but they had their own creed, they had their own privileges, priorities, and they spread among the Jews of those days their own teachings and their own practices. And this is how this magic and sorcery, that permeated the whole Jewish society. وَمَا أُنزِلَ عَلَى الْمَلَكَيْنِ بِبَابِلَ هَارُوتَ وَمَارُوتَ. And this is the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that when something wrong, becomes prevalent in a society, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts that society to some big test and trial. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down two angels, Harut and Marut. وَمَا أُنزِلَ عَلَى الْمَلَكَيْنِ بِبَابِلَ, in Babylon. And that was the days of the captivity of the Jews, when Nebuchadnezzar had destroyed Jerusalem and took so many of them as captives to Babylonia, Babel. And there actually, during that captivity period, this sorcery and magic and all these things, these occult sciences, they became very prevalent. وَمَا أُنزِلَ عَلَى الْمَلَكَيْنِ بِبَابِلَ هَارُوتَ وَمَارُوتَ وَمَا يُعَلِّمَانِ مِنْ أَحَدٍ حَتَّى يَقُولَا. And these both angels in the form of men, they never taught anybody that sihr and magic and sorcery, but they said beforehand, إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ فِتْنَةٌ. We are a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are a trial for you. فَلَا تَكْفُرْ. You don't commit kufr. You don't try to learn this sihr, this magic and this sorcery. فَيَتَعَلَّمُونَ مِنْهُمَا. Despite this warning from those angels, they learned from them مَا يُفَرِّقُونَ بِهِ بَيْنَ الْمَرْءِ وَزَوْجِهِ. That thing with which they could separate the husband from the wife. Separation, causing separation between the wives and the husbands. وَمَا هُمْ بِضَارِّينَ بِهِ مِنْ أَحَدٍ. Although the real fact is that they couldn't do any harm to anybody except with the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nothing can happen without the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is an article of faith. No food can do any good to you, no medicine can do any good to you without the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All the things, they have all the minerals and all the compounds, they have their own properties. But these properties can't come into actual effect without the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So even magic, by itself it cannot do anything, but with the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Illa biiznillah wa yata'allamuna ma yadurruhum. And they used to learn from them what harmed them, wala yanfa'uhum, and was not beneficial to them. وَلَقَدْ عَلِمُوا, although they very well knew, it was made plain to them, which was clear to them in Torah. لَمَنِ اشْتَرَاهُ مَا لَهُ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنْ خَلَاقٍ. Whosoever will pursue this sorcery and magic, whosoever will purchase it, whosoever will adopt it, for him there is no share in the hereafter. مَا لَهُ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنْ خَلَاقٍ وَبِئْسَ مَا شَرَوْا بِهِ أَنفُسَهُمْ. But indeed, it was very bad for which they sold their own souls. لَوْ كَانُوا يَعْلَمُونَ. Only if they could know. Actually, they didn't know what they are doing, what harm they are doing to themselves by taking to these pursuits, by adopting these lines and these attitudes. They were actually throwing themselves with their own hands into the fire of hell. وَلَوْ أَنَّهُمْ آمَنُوا. And had they came to believe, if they had the real belief, if they really believed, لَمَسُوبَةٌ مِّنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ خَيْرٌ. Then the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have been much better for them. Had they struck to the right path, had they followed the book of Allah instead of these practices of shayateen, this magic and sorcery. Instead of these things, had they followed the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, had they followed the truth and the straight path, لَمَسُوبَةٌ مِّنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ خَيْرٌ. Then the reward that they would have got from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have been much better, much better. لَوْ كَانُوا يَعْلَمُونَ. Only if they could know, only if they had the real knowledge. بارك الله لي ولكم في القرآن العظيم ونفعني وإياكم بالآيات والذكر الحكيم.